The blood on her hands had dried to a rust color by the time Ophelia Arnesen stumbled into Malad City, Idaho, in the late summer of 1872, her feet wrapped in torn cloth that had once been part of her skirt. She spoke not a word of English, only Norwegian, and the terror in her blue eyes told a story her lips could not form in a language anyone around her would understand. The sun beat down mercilessly on the dusty Main Street as she collapsed near the general store, her dark blonde hair matted with dirt and sweat, her travel-worn dress hanging off her thin frame. Adam Rowland was loading supplies onto his pack mule when he heard the commotion. He stood well over 6 feet tall, with broad shoulders that strained against his buckskin shirt and arms thick with muscle from years of trapping and hunting in the mountains. His dark hair fell past his shoulders, tied back with a leather cord, and his beard was neatly trimmed despite his solitary lifestyle. He had come down from his cabin in the mountains for his quarterly supply run, a trip he made with reluctance because he preferred the company of bears and elk to most people. The crowd gathering around the fallen woman irritated him, but something in her face when he pushed through made him stop. She was young, maybe 20 or 21, and her eyes held a kind of desperate hope that reminded him of a doe he had once found caught in a trap, still fighting to live despite the odds. "Give her space," he said, his voice deep and commanding enough that people actually stepped back. He knelt beside her and offered his canteen. She looked at him with suspicion first, then desperation won out and she drank greedily. "Slow," he said gently, though he knew she probably did not understand. He pulled the canteen back slightly and she seemed to comprehend, taking smaller sips. She spoke then, a torrent of words in a language he did not recognize. Her hands gestured wildly, pointing back the way she had come, and tears streamed down her dirty cheeks. The fear in her voice was universal, needing no translation. "Doc Winters," Adam called out, and the town doctor pushed through the crowd. Together they got her to the doctor's office, where his wife helped clean the girl up while the men waited outside. "She is not hurt physically, aside from exhausted feet and dehydration," Doc Winters said when he emerged an hour later. "But she is terrified. My wife got her to eat something, and she keeps saying words we cannot understand. Sounds like it might be one of those Scandinavian languages, but I cannot be sure." Adam nodded slowly. He had dealt with immigrants before in his travels, though mostly German and Irish folk. "Anyone in town speak Norwegian or Swedish or Danish? Not that I know of. The Johnsons are German, but that is about it for anyone not speaking English primarily." Doc Winters sighed. "She needs somewhere to stay, at least until we figure out what happened and where she came from." Adam found himself saying something he had not planned. "I will take her to my cabin. She will be safe there while we sort this out." The doctor raised an eyebrow. "You live 3 days' ride into the mountains, Adam. How will that help her? She is scared of something or someone. Out there, nobody will find her if she does not want to be found. And I can keep her fed and sheltered while I figure out her language." Even as he said it, Adam wondered what possessed him to make such an offer. He valued his solitude above almost everything else. But when Ophelia emerged from the back room, wearing one of Mrs. Winters's spare dresses, her hair braided and clean, something in Adam's chest tightened. She looked at him with those clear blue eyes and spoke softly in her language, a question evident in her tone. He gestured to himself. "Adam," then pointed at her with a questioning look. She understood that much. "Ophelia," she said, pronouncing it with a slightly different lilt than he was used to hearing. "Ophelia," he repeated, and she nodded, almost smiling. Over the next hour, using gestures and simple actions, Adam managed to convey that she would come with him to a safe place. She seemed to understand, or perhaps she simply had no other choice. Doc Winters provided supplies and a spare horse, and by late afternoon they were riding out of Malad City toward the mountains. The journey took 3 full days, as Adam had told the doctor. They traveled through increasingly rugged terrain, leaving behind the sage-covered valleys for pine forests and rocky ridges. At night, Adam set up camp with practiced efficiency, building a fire and cooking simple meals of salt pork, beans, and coffee. Ophelia watched everything he did with intense focus, as if trying to memorize each action. On the second night, as they sat across the fire from each other, Adam pulled out a small notebook he used for tracking animal signs and seasons. He pointed at the fire and said, "Fire." Then he wrote the word down and showed it to her, her eyes lit up with understanding. She repeated, "Fire," with her accent making it sound like fear at first, but she tried again and got closer. He pointed at the coffee pot. "Coffee, coffee," she said. They continued like this for an hour, him teaching her basic words, her repeating them with determination. Then she took the pencil from him gently and wrote in his notebook, "Ild." She pointed at the fire. "That is fire in your language." He asked, knowing she could not understand the full question but hoping she would get the gist. "Ja," she said, nodding. "Ild. Ild," he repeated, and her face broke into the first real smile he had seen from her. That became their pattern. He would teach her English words, and she would teach him Norwegian ones. It was slow, frustrating work, but Adam found himself looking forward to these evening lessons more than he had looked forward to anything in years. His cabin sat in a high valley, protected on 3 sides by steep ridges and opening onto a meadow where a creek ran clear and cold. He had built it himself over several years, crafting it from logs he had felled and dragged into place. It was a single large room with a sleeping loft, a stone fireplace, and windows he had traded furs for in town. It was simple but solid, built to withstand the harsh mountain winters. Ophelia's eyes widened when she saw it. She said something in Norwegian that sounded appreciative, then added in halting English, "Good house." "Thank you," Adam said, pleased despite himself. He showed her around, indicating that she would take the loft while he would sleep in the main room. She protested at first, he could tell, but he insisted with gestures and a firm shake of his head. The days fell into a rhythm. Adam would rise early and tend to his trap lines or hunt for fresh meat, while Ophelia kept the cabin tidy and learned to cook on his fireplace. She proved surprisingly adept at mountain life, showing none of the squeamishness some city folk had about preparing game or hauling water from the creek. He wondered what her life had been like in Norway, what had brought her across an ocean to this wild place. 3 weeks after their arrival at the cabin, as autumn began to paint the aspens gold, Ophelia's English had improved enough for simple conversations. One evening, as they worked together preparing a deer he had brought down, she finally told him part of her story. "My family," she began, pausing to find words. "We come to America for good life, better than Norway, farm in Minnesota." She pronounced it carefully, having clearly memorized the state name. "But the sickness comes. Father, mother, my 2 brothers, all gone in 1 month." Adam stopped his work, giving her his full attention. "I am sorry," he said quietly. She nodded, blinking back tears. "A man there, he say he will marry me, help me, but he is bad man, he wanna hurt me." She touched her wrists, where Adam had noticed fading bruises the first day they met. "I run away. I have little money, take the wagon going west. The wagon people, they do not like that I do not speak English well. They leave me in Malad City." The anger that rose in Adam's chest surprised him with its intensity. "You are safe now," he said firmly. "Nobody will hurt you here." "You are good man, Adam," she said, meeting his eyes. "Why you help me?" He did not have a good answer to that, at least not one he was ready to admit even to himself. Because it was the right thing to do. As fall deepened into early winter, Adam continued teaching Ophelia English while learning Norwegian from her. He discovered she had a quick wit and a sharp mind, often making connections between words that impressed him. She taught him not just words but songs and stories from her homeland, tales of trolls in mountains and the sea that called to Norwegian hearts even across an ocean. He told her about his own past, something he rarely spoke of to anyone. His family had died too, though in different circumstances. His parents and younger sister had been killed by bandits when he was 19, driving a freight wagon through Kansas. He had hunted down the men responsible and delivered rough frontier justice, but the hollow feeling never left. He had retreated to the mountains after that, finding peace in solitude that civilization could never offer him. "We are same," Ophelia said after hearing his story. "Both alone." "Not anymore," Adam replied, then realized what he had said and busied himself with stoking the fire. But it was true. Her presence had changed his cabin from a shelter into something approaching a home. She had sewn new curtains from spare cloth he had stored away, arranged wildflowers in a tin cup on the table before the frost killed them, and hung herbs from the rafters to dry. She sang while she worked, her voice clear and lovely, filling the space with a warmth that had nothing to do with the fireplace. Adam found himself watching her more than he should, noticing the way afternoon light caught in her hair, the curve of her neck when she bent over her sewing, the sound of her laughter when he told a story about a particularly stubborn mule. He was falling in love with her, he realized one evening as he watched her teach him to count to 20 in Norwegian. The recognition hit him like a physical blow. But what could he offer her? He was a mountain man, more comfortable with a knife and rifle than with soft words and courting. She deserved someone who could give her a real life, not this isolated existence, no matter how beautiful the mountains were. Winter came hard and fast that year. The first major snow arrived in mid-November, dumping 3 feet in 2 days and trapping them in the cabin. Adam had prepared well, with smoked meat, dried beans, flour, and other supplies stocked in his cellar. They had firewood stacked high against the cabin walls. They would not starve or freeze, but they would also not be going anywhere for months. Being snowed in together forced an intimacy that both thrilled and terrified Adam. Every gesture, every conversation felt weighted with meaning. Ophelia seemed to feel it too, her eyes following him as he moved around the cabin, her hand lingering when she passed him a cup of coffee. One evening in December, as wind howled outside and snow piled higher against the windows, they sat by the fire sharing a bottle of whiskey he had been saving. The alcohol loosened tongues and lowered defenses. "In Norway, at Christmas time, we light candles in windows," Ophelia said, her English now fluent enough for complex thoughts though still accented. "To welcome travelers, to show hope in dark time. I miss that." "We can do that here," Adam said. "I have candles." She smiled at him, and in the firelight she looked so beautiful it hurt. "You are kind to me, Adam, more kind than anyone in very long time." He should have stayed quiet. He should have just smiled and changed the subject. Instead, the whiskey and the isolation and the months of growing feelings overwhelmed his caution. "That is because I love you," he said in Norwegian. He had been practicing the phrase in secret for weeks, wanting to get it perfect. "Jeg elsker deg." Ophelia's breath caught. Her eyes went wide, searching his face. "You know what you say?" "Yes," he replied, switching back to English. "I know exactly what I said. I love you, Ophelia. I have loved you since sometime in those first weeks, maybe even that first day when you looked at me like I might save you." I am not good with words in any language, but that is the truth of it." She was quiet for a long moment, so long that Adam felt his heart sink. He had ruined everything with his confession, scared her with feelings she did not share. Then she moved from her seat and came to kneel beside his chair. She took his large, calloused hand in both of hers. "Jeg elsker deg også," she whispered. "I love you too. I think maybe I love you when you first teach me words by fire, when you are so patient. I think maybe I hope you feel same, but I am afraid. I am afraid I am trouble for you, that you help me from kindness only." Adam set down his whiskey and cupped her face with his free hand, his thumb brushing across her cheekbone. "You could never be trouble. You are the best thing to come into my life in more years than I can count." When he kissed her, it felt like coming home after a long journey. She kissed him back with a sweetness and passion that made his head spin. They stayed like that for a while, kissing and holding each other, the storm outside forgotten. "I want to do this right," Adam said eventually. "I want to marry you proper in town with a preacher and everything legal." "In spring," Ophelia agreed, "when snow melts and we can go to town. But in my heart I am already yours." "And I am yours," he promised. That winter became the happiest time of Adam's life. He and Ophelia did not anticipate their wedding vows, both wanting to wait until they were properly married. But they shared the sleeping loft, lying in each other's arms through the long, cold nights, talking and planning their future. She taught him more Norwegian, and he continued teaching her English. They cooked together, read together from his small collection of books, and played cards by the fireplace. Adam carved her a beautiful hair comb from a piece of elk antler, working on it in secret during his trips to check the trap line. Ophelia sewed him a new shirt from fabric she had been saving, embroidering Norwegian patterns on the collar and cuffs. On Christmas Eve, they lit candles in all the windows, and Ophelia taught Adam Norwegian Christmas carols. Her voice filled the cabin with joy, and Adam thought he had never heard anything so beautiful. They gave each other their handmade gifts, and Ophelia cried happy tears over the comb. "I have nothing valuable to give you," she said. "Only my heart, which you already have." "That is everything," Adam replied, pulling her close. The deep winter months tested them sometimes. Being isolated with anyone, even someone you love, can create tension. They had small arguments about trivial things, how to organize the supplies or whether to add more salt to the stew. But they learned to talk through disagreements, helped by the fact that neither wanted to hurt the other, and both remembered what it was like to be truly alone. Ophelia told him more about Norway during those long evenings, about growing up in a small fishing village where the winter darkness lasted for months, and the summer sun barely set. She described how her family had scraped together everything they had for passage to America, believing the promise of land and opportunity. The grief of losing them all still shadowed her eyes sometimes, but Adam learned how to comfort her, holding her while she cried and listening when she needed to talk. He told her more about his own family too, memories he had buried for years. His mother's laugh, his father's patience teaching him to shoot, his little sister's endless questions about everything. Sharing these memories with Ophelia felt like honoring his family in a way he had not been able to before. "They would have liked you," he said one evening. "My mother especially. She always said I needed someone who could match my stubbornness." Ophelia laughed. "I am stubborn. You walked across half of Idaho by yourself after running from a bad man. Yes, you are stubborn. That is a compliment." "Then I say thank you," she replied, kissing his cheek. In late February, they had a scare when Ophelia fell ill with a fever. For 3 terrifying days, Adam nursed her, bathing her with cool water and forcing her to drink willow bark tea. He barely slept, too afraid of losing her to close his eyes for long. When her fever finally broke, he held her and thanked God or fate or whatever force had spared her. "I am going to be fine," she whispered, weak but smiling. "It takes more than a fever to kill a Norwegian farm girl." "Do not joke," he said roughly. "I cannot lose you." "You will not," she promised. "We have too many years ahead of us." March brought the first signs of thaw, water dripping from icicles and patches of bare ground appearing in sheltered spots. By early April, the snow had retreated enough that Adam declared they could attempt the journey to town. They spent several days preparing, packing carefully and making sure the cabin would be secure in their absence. The trip down the mountain took 4 days instead of 3, the trails muddy and difficult. But the weather held clear, and they reached Malad City on a bright spring afternoon. Doc Winters was delighted to see them both, having wondered all winter if they had survived. "We did more than survive," Adam said. "We need a preacher. We are getting married." The wedding took place 2 days later, giving time for the circuit preacher to arrive and for Ophelia to acquire a proper dress. Mrs. Winters and several other town ladies helped with preparations, thrilled to have a wedding to plan. The whole town turned out for the ceremony, curious about the mysterious Norwegian woman and the solitary mountain man who had claimed her heart. Ophelia looked beautiful in a simple white dress with blue ribbons, her hair adorned with the comb Adam had made. Adam had even agreed to trim his beard and hair, though he refused to cut it short. He wore his new embroidered shirt with pride, along with his best pants and a vest he had purchased from the general store. When the preacher asked if he took Ophelia to be his wife, Adam said, "I do," in English, then repeated "Ja, jeg vil" in Norwegian, making her laugh through happy tears. They spent a week in town, Adam selling his winter's catch of furs and purchasing supplies for the journey back. He also bought Ophelia a proper wedding ring, a simple gold band that made her cry when he slipped it on her finger. They stayed in the boarding house, finally able to consummate their marriage in privacy, discovering passion and tenderness in each other's arms. Before they left town, a young couple approached them. The man spoke in halting Norwegian, having overheard Ophelia speaking with Adam. He and his wife had emigrated from Denmark the previous year and were struggling to establish themselves. Ophelia spent hours talking with them in a mix of Norwegian and Danish, close enough languages that they could understand each other well. The loneliness in the woman's eyes as she spoke her native tongue reminded Adam of how Ophelia must have felt in those early days. "There are more like us," Ophelia said thoughtfully that evening. "People who come from far away and do not speak the language, who are lost and scared." "What are you thinking?" Adam asked. "I do not know yet," she admitted, "but maybe someday we can help, like you helped me." The journey back to the cabin felt different this time, like they were truly going home rather than hiding away. The mountains were waking from winter sleep, with new grass pushing through old snow and animals emerging from dens. Adam showed Ophelia his favorite spots, a waterfall that thundered with snowmelt and a meadow where elk grazed in the evenings. Life settled into new patterns back at the cabin. They were husband and wife now, partners in every sense. Adam taught Ophelia to shoot, both rifle and pistol, insisting she needed to be able to protect herself if he was ever injured or away. She proved a quick study, her steady hands and sharp eyes making her a decent marksman within weeks. Ophelia expanded the garden plot near the cabin, planting vegetables and herbs. She had seeds she had been saving from before her family died, heirloom varieties from Norway that she tended with special care. Adam built her a chicken coop, and they acquired 6 hens from a farmer near town, ensuring fresh eggs. Summer in the high country was glorious. They worked hard but also took time to enjoy each other and their surroundings. Adam taught Ophelia to fish in the creek, laughing at her squeals when she caught her first trout. They hiked to high alpine lakes where the water was so clear you could see to the bottom, and wildflowers covered entire hillsides in riots of color. In late July, Ophelia told Adam she was pregnant. They had been lying in the meadow watching clouds drift past when she took his hand and placed it on her still flat stomach. "There is a baby," she said simply. "Our baby." Adam felt joy flood through him so intensely he could not speak at first. He pulled her close and kissed her forehead, her cheeks, her lips. "Are you sure?" "Yes," she said, laughing. "Women know these things. The baby will come in winter, I think, January or February," his joy mixed with concern. "We should go to town, stay there for the birth. It would be safer." But Ophelia shook her head. "I want our baby born here in our home. Norwegian women are strong. We birth babies in farmhouses and fishing cottages. I will be fine and you will be here with me." They compromised, deciding Ophelia would go to town in December and stay with Doc and Mrs. Winters for the birth. Adam would come with her and remain until after the baby arrived. Neither of them wanted to risk anything happening to Ophelia or their child. The pregnancy agreed with Ophelia. She glowed with health, her body ripening with the promise of new life. Adam became even more protective, insisting she rest more and let him handle heavier chores. She tolerated his hovering with amused patience, occasionally reminding him that she was pregnant, not made of glass. Autumn brought another successful hunting season, and Adam worked hard to ensure they had plenty of meat preserved for the winter ahead. They would need extra supplies with a baby coming, and he wanted everything perfect. In late November, they made the journey to Malad City, moving slowly to accommodate Ophelia's condition. They settled into a room at the Winters' house, and the doctor's wife fussed over Ophelia like a mother hen. Mrs. Winters had lost a child in infancy years before and never had another, so she poured all her maternal instincts into caring for the young Norwegian woman. Christmas came and went, and still the baby did not arrive. Ophelia grew tired of being pregnant, her back aching and her ankles swelling. Adam did everything he could to keep her comfortable, but he felt helpless watching her discomfort. Finally, on a snowy January evening in 1874, Ophelia's labor began. Adam paced the parlor while Doc Winters and his wife attended the birth upstairs. The sound of Ophelia's cries made him nearly climb the stairs several times, but Mrs. Winters had firmly told him this was women's work and he needed to stay put. After hours that felt like years, he heard the sound he had been waiting for, a baby's cry, strong and healthy. Doc Winters appeared at the top of the stairs, grinning. "You have a son, Adam, and Ophelia did beautifully. Come meet your boy." Adam took the stairs 3 at a time. Ophelia lay in bed, exhausted but radiant, holding a tiny bundle wrapped in blankets. The baby had stopped crying and was making small snuffling sounds. "Our son," she said, her voice tired but full of love. "Come see him." Adam approached almost fearfully, this giant of a man suddenly terrified of the tiny creature. But when he looked down at his son's small face, perfect and new, something shifted in his heart. He had thought he understood love when he fell for Ophelia, but this was something different, something primal and overwhelming. "He is perfect," Adam whispered. "What should we name him?" Ophelia asked. They had discussed names for months without deciding. Now, looking at his son, Adam knew. "What was your father's name?" "Christian," Ophelia said softly. "Then Christian, if that is acceptable to you. Christian Rowland." Tears slipped down Ophelia's cheeks. "My father would have been honored. Yes, Christian is perfect." They stayed in town for 6 weeks, giving Ophelia time to recover and the baby time to grow stronger before attempting the mountain journey. Christian proved to be a good baby, nursing well and sleeping in reasonable stretches. Adam was besotted with his son, happy to walk the floor with him at night and change soiled diapers without complaint. The journey back to the cabin in early March was slow and careful, with Christian bundled warmly against the lingering cold. But they made it safely, and Adam felt profound relief when their home came into view. Life with a baby changed everything and nothing. The cabin still stood in its mountain valley, the creek still ran clear, but now the sounds of infant cries and Ophelia's lullabies filled the space. Adam found he did not mind the sleepless nights or the constant demands of a baby. Christian was part of him and Ophelia, proof of their love made flesh. As winter released its grip and spring arrived again, Ophelia regained her strength. She took to motherhood naturally, though she admitted to Adam that she missed her own mother terribly, wishing she could ask advice about feeding schedules and infant ailments. Adam did his best to help, but he was often as clueless as she was about the mysteries of babies. By summer, Christian was a chubby, happy baby who loved being carried outside to watch birds and feel the breeze on his face. Adam made a carrier from leather and wood, secured to his back, that allowed him to take his son on short hikes. Ophelia would watch them leave, her two men, and feel contentment so deep it was almost painful. The years began to flow like the creek, each season bringing its own rhythms and challenges. Christian learned to walk, then to run, then to help with small chores around the cabin. At 3 years old, he was speaking both English and Norwegian fluently, switching between languages as easily as breathing. Adam often marveled at his son's quick mind and curiosity about everything. When Christian was 4, Ophelia gave birth to their second child, a daughter they named Anna after Adam's mother. The birth was easier this time, with Ophelia delivering at home with only Adam's help. He had prepared carefully, reading every medical book Doc Winters could lend him, and though it was terrifying to be solely responsible, everything went well. Christian adored his baby sister, wanting to help with everything. Adam watched his son gently rock the cradle and sing Norwegian lullabies Ophelia had taught him, and felt his heart might burst from happiness. This life, this family, was more than he had ever dreamed possible. They made annual trips to town, both for supplies and to maintain connections with the outside world. Each time they visited, Malad City had grown a little, with new buildings and new faces. More immigrant families had arrived, many struggling with the language and customs. Ophelia always sought them out, offering help and friendship to those who needed it most. On one such trip, when Christian was 6 and Anna was 2, they met a young Swedish woman who had been abandoned by the family she traveled with after disagreement. She was desperate and alone, trying to survive by taking in laundry. Ophelia brought her to the cabin for the summer, giving her a safe place to recover and teaching her English. By autumn, the woman had gained enough confidence to return to town and start a small bakery with money she had saved. This became a pattern. Every few years, Ophelia would bring someone to the cabin, usually a woman but occasionally a family, who needed help adjusting to their new country. Adam never objected, understanding that Ophelia was paying forward the kindness he had shown her. Their cabin became known as a place of refuge, where immigrants could learn English and mountain skills in safety. When Christian was 10, he told his parents he wanted to become a doctor like Doc Winters. Adam and Ophelia discussed it seriously with him, explaining the years of education it would require and the time away from the mountains. Christian was certain, his kind heart already showing in how he cared for injured animals and helped his mother tend sick chickens. They began planning for his future, saving money from fur sales and Ophelia's occasional work as a translator in town. It would be several years before Christian was old enough for medical school, but they wanted to be ready. Anna proved different from her gentle brother. At 5, she could outshoot most adults and preferred tracking deer with her father to helping in the garden. Adam recognized himself in his daughter's fierce independence and love of wilderness. He taught her everything he knew about surviving in the mountains, and she absorbed it all with intense focus. Ophelia gave birth to a third child when Anna was 7, another boy they named Thomas. By this time, they had expanded the cabin, adding 2 additional rooms to accommodate their growing family. The place Adam had built as a hermit's retreat had become a bustling household filled with life and love. The years continued their march. Christian left for medical school in Utah when he was 18, breaking Ophelia's heart, but also filling her with pride. He promised to return to Idaho when his training was complete, wanting to serve the mountain communities that needed doctors desperately. Adam helped his son prepare for the wider world, teaching him to stand up for himself and trust his instincts. Anna showed no interest in leaving the mountains. At 16, she was as skilled a hunter and trapper as her father, and Adam had begun teaching her the business side of his work. She had also shown unexpected talent with horses, training them with patience and understanding that resulted in remarkable partnerships between horse and rider. Thomas, at 11, was still deciding who he wanted to be. He had his mother's way with languages, speaking Norwegian, English, and bits of German and Swedish picked up from the various people who passed through their home. He also loved stories, constantly begging for tales of the old country or Adam's adventures before settling down. In 1889, when Ophelia was 38 and Adam was 42, they celebrated their 15th wedding anniversary. They left the children with a trusted neighbor family in town and spent a week at the cabin alone, something they had not done since before Christian was born. "You ever regret it?" Adam asked one evening as they sat on the porch watching sunset paint the mountains purple and gold. "Your life could have been very different if you had gone to a city instead of stumbling into Malad City that day." Ophelia took his hand, her fingers intertwining with his. "I regret nothing. You gave me more than safety that day, Adam. You gave me a reason to live again after losing everything. You learned my language just to tell me you loved me. How could I ever regret the life we built?" "I learned your language because I was falling in love with you and could not bear that you did not understand," Adam said. "It seemed like the most important thing in the world that you know what I felt." "It was the most romantic thing anyone has ever done," Ophelia said softly. "That moment when you said Jeg elsker deg in Norwegian, I knew you had been planning it, practicing it. You are not a man of fancy words, but you learned words in a foreign language just to reach my heart. I knew then that I was the luckiest woman alive." They made love that night with the tenderness of long familiarity and the passion that had never quite faded. Afterward, lying in each other's arms, Adam thought about all the years behind them and hopefully many more ahead. They had built something lasting, not just in timber and stone, but in the family they had created and the people they had helped along the way. Christian returned from medical school in 1891, setting up practice in Malad City, but maintaining a satellite office in his parents' cabin for treating the scattered mountain families. He had met a young woman in school, the daughter of a professor, and brought her home to meet his family. Sarah was nothing like the rough mountain women Adam had expected his son to marry, but she had a kind heart and genuinely cared for Christian, so she was welcomed with open arms. They married that summer in the meadow outside the cabin, with wildflowers everywhere and both families in attendance. Ophelia cried through the entire ceremony, and Adam's eyes were suspiciously bright. Their firstborn was starting his own family now, continuing the cycle. Anna announced at 19 that she was entering business partnership with a rancher's son, running a horse breeding and training operation. She had no interest in marriage, she declared firmly, wanting to focus on her work. Adam respected her choice, though he suspected the right person simply had not come along yet. He had felt the same way about marriage before Ophelia crashed into his life. Thomas, at 15, had decided he wanted to be a teacher, specifically teaching English to immigrant children. He had seen how his mother helped people by bridging the language gap and wanted to do the same on a larger scale. Ophelia was thrilled, spending hours working with him on teaching methods and curriculum ideas. The new century arrived with celebration and reflection. Adam was now 53, his hair more gray than brown, his beard fully silver. Ophelia was 49, her face lined but still beautiful to Adam's eyes. They had been married 26 years, and their love had only deepened with time. Christian and Sarah had given them 3 grandchildren, including a set of twin girls who visited the cabin every summer and drove their grandfather to distraction with their fearless climbing and exploring. Anna had eventually married, surprising everyone by falling for a quiet bookkeeper who shared her love of horses. They had one son, named Adam after his grandfather. Thomas was teaching at a school in Boise but visited often, bringing news of the wider world. One spring evening in 1903, as Adam and Ophelia sat on their porch watching the sun set, she leaned her head on his shoulder with a contented sigh. "Tell me again how you learned to say you loved me in Norwegian," she said. It was a story she requested often, never tiring of hearing it. Adam smiled, wrapping his arm around her. "I would lie awake at night after you had gone to sleep in the loft, practicing the sounds. I must have asked you how to say 100 different things just so I could hear you speak your language and try to understand the patterns. When I finally asked you directly how to say I love you, I pretended I wanted to know for trading with other Norwegians in town. And I believed you," Ophelia laughed. "I thought I was so clever, teaching you romantic phrases while hiding my own feelings." "You taught me more than you knew," Adam said seriously. "Not just language, but how to open my heart again. I had closed myself off after my family died, convinced I was better off alone. You showed me I was wrong. We saved each other," Ophelia said. "I was lost, alone, terrified in a strange land. You gave me safety and then love. We built this beautiful life together, raised good children, helped so many people. When I stumbled into Malad City that day, bloody and scared, I thought my life was over. Instead, it was just beginning." They sat in comfortable silence as darkness fell and stars began to appear. The creek babbled its eternal song, and somewhere in the forest an owl hooted. The mountains stood eternal around them, the same peaks that had sheltered them for over 30 years. Inside the cabin, lamplight glowed warm and welcoming. This building that Adam had constructed with his own hands as a lonely refuge had become the center of a family, a beacon for those in need, a home in the truest sense of the word. The walls had witnessed births and deaths, laughter and tears, fear transformed into courage, and love that deepened with each passing year. "No regrets?" Adam asked again, needing to hear it one more time. "Not a single one," Ophelia replied firmly. "I would walk those dusty miles to Malad City 1,000 times if it meant finding you at the end. You learned my language to tell me you loved me, Adam. How could I ever regret the man who cared enough to do that?" Adam pulled her closer, kissing the top of her head. "Jeg elsker deg," he said in Norwegian, the words as familiar now as breathing. Jeg elsker deg også, she replied. Always and forever. They stayed on the porch until the cold drove them inside, then banked the fire and climbed to the loft they still shared. The cabin settled around them with creaks and sighs, a living thing that held decades of memories within its log walls. Outside, the mountains stood guard as they had for centuries, indifferent to the small human dramas played out beneath their peaks, yet somehow protective of the love story that had unfolded in this high valley. Years continued to pass with the steady rhythm of mountain life. Grandchildren grew into adults with children of their own. Adam and Ophelia grew older but remained active, still taking daily walks through their beloved valley when weather permitted. Their hair turned white, their bodies showed the wear of hard living, but their love remained vibrant and strong. In 1910, on their 36th wedding anniversary, their entire family gathered at the cabin. Children, grandchildren, and even a few great-grandchildren filled the expanded homestead and spilled out into the meadow. Sarah had organized the celebration, wanting to honor the couple who had built such a remarkable legacy. Christian stood to make a speech, looking distinguished in his 40s with his medical practice thriving and his own children grown. My parents taught me that love is not just a feeling but a choice you make every day. They chose each other across a language barrier, across different cultures and backgrounds. They chose to build a life in these mountains, and they chose to help others along the way. Because of their choices, we are all here today. Because my father learned Norwegian to tell my mother he loved her, this entire family exists. Everyone raised glasses in toast, and Adam felt emotion tighten his throat. Ophelia squeezed his hand, her eyes bright with happy tears. They had never imagined, sitting around a campfire on that journey to the cabin so long ago, stumbling through basic vocabulary words, that they were starting something that would touch so many lives. Anna stood next, her weathered face breaking into a rare smile. My parents taught me to be strong, to trust myself, to never be afraid of being different. Ma showed me that being female does not mean being weak, and Pa taught me that strength comes in many forms. They built a partnership of equals, and that is what I sought in my own marriage. Thank you both for showing me what real love looks like. Thomas was next, speaking with the eloquence of a born teacher. I have worked with hundreds of immigrant families over the years, helping them bridge the gap between their old languages and their new life in English. Every single time I help someone feel less alone in a confusing new world, I think of how Pa helped Ma when she was lost and scared. They taught me that kindness to strangers is never wasted, that taking time to understand someone different from yourself can change lives. Everything good I have done in my life stems from their example. The celebration continued long into the evening, with music and dancing and stories told and retold. Adam and Ophelia held each other and watched their legacy unfold before them. All these lives that existed because a lonely mountain man had stopped to help a desperate immigrant woman on a dusty street in Malad City 38 years before. As night fell and the party began to wind down, Adam and Ophelia slipped away to their favorite spot by the creek. The water still ran clear and cold, the stars still wheeled overhead in their ancient patterns. They sat on a fallen log they had claimed decades ago, worn smooth by countless evenings just like this one. "We did well, did we not?" Ophelia said softly, her Norwegian accent still present after all these years, a reminder of where she had come from. "We did better than well," Adam replied. "We built something that will outlast us, something good and true. All because you learned to say Jeg elsker deg," she mused. 3 little words in a foreign language that changed everything. "Not just the words," Adam corrected gently, "the caring enough to learn them." The wanting to reach you where you were instead of demanding you come to me. That is what made the difference. Ophelia turned to look at him, her face soft in the starlight. Even now, in their 70s, Adam thought she was beautiful. The years had marked them both, but to his eyes, she was still the frightened but fierce young woman he had fallen in love with. If I could go back and speak to that terrified girl stumbling into Malad City, I would tell her that everything will be better than she could possibly imagine, Ophelia said. That the big, scary mountain man offering her water will become the love of her life. That she will bear his children and build a home in the wilderness and be happy beyond measure. She would not believe me, but it would all be true. If I could speak to the lonely man I was before you, I would tell him to be ready, Adam said. Tell him that his life is about to begin in ways he cannot fathom. That he will learn what it means to truly love someone, to build a family, to have a purpose beyond mere survival. I was not living before you, Ophelia. I was just existing. They sat together as the night deepened, two old people holding hands like young lovers. The creek sang its endless song, and the mountains stood watch, and the cabin glowed with lamplight and life behind them. Inside, their family talked and laughed, secure in the knowledge that they were part of something larger than themselves, a love story that had rippled outward to touch dozens of lives. Adam and Ophelia Rowland had decades of marriage behind them and hopefully a few years still ahead. They had raised 3 children who were making their own marks on the world. They had helped countless immigrants find their footing in a strange new land. They had built a home that was legendary in its hospitality and warmth. But most importantly, they had loved each other completely, through good times and hard times, through the everyday ordinary moments that make up a life. And it had all started with a mountain man caring enough about a Norwegian immigrant to learn her language so he could properly tell her he loved her. 3 words in Norwegian, practiced in secret and spoken with a mixture of hope and fear, had unlocked everything that came after. Jeg elsker deg. I love you. The simplest and most profound words in any language, made even more powerful because Adam had crossed the barrier of unfamiliar sounds and grammar to reach Ophelia's heart in her mother tongue. As they finally rose to head inside for the night, Adam spoke one more time in Norwegian, his pronunciation still slightly rough after all these years but the meaning crystal clear. Jeg elsker deg, min kjære kone. I love you, my dear wife. Ophelia smiled, her eyes crinkling at the corners, and replied in the language they had built together, part English, part Norwegian, wholly their own. And I love you, my heart, today and always and forever. Alltid og for alltid. They walked hand in hand back to the cabin, back to the warmth and light and family, back to the life they had built word by word, day by day, year by year. Behind them, the mountains kept their silent vigil, and the creek kept singing, and the stars kept shining. The Wild West was changing, growing more civilized with each passing year, but in this high valley, the things that mattered most remained constant. Love, family, the willingness to help others, and 2 people who had found each other against all odds and refused to let go. Their story would be told to their great-great-grandchildren, passed down through generations as an example of what real love looked like. The mountain man who learned Norwegian for love. The immigrant woman who built a new life from nothing. The family they created together, strong and loving and kind. It was a legacy better than gold or land or any material wealth, a legacy of the heart that would endure long after the cabin itself returned to dust. And every time someone in the family learned a new language or helped a stranger in need or chose love over fear, they were honoring Adam and Ophelia, keeping their story alive. The power of reaching across differences, of taking the time to understand someone else's world, of caring enough to learn 3 words in a foreign tongue just to properly express love. That was the lesson that echoed down through the decades. In the end, it was simple. A man and a woman, 2 lonely souls finding each other at exactly the right moment. Language barriers overcome through patience and determination. Love given freely and returned in full measure. A life built together in the shadow of mountains that had seen countless human dramas unfold, but perhaps rarely witnessed a love as true and lasting as what Adam and Ophelia shared. When Adam Rowland died peacefully in his sleep at the age of 78, Ophelia was holding his hand. His last words were in Norwegian, the language he had learned for love. "Tack for live salmon. Thank you for the life together." Ophelia, 75 and still strong, kissed his forehead and whispered back, "We will meet again, my love. Jeg elsker deg." She lived another 5 years, surrounded by family, working in her garden and telling stories of the old days to anyone who would listen. When she finally joined Adam, it was on a spring day much like the one when they had first made the journey to his mountain cabin. She was buried beside him in the small cemetery they had established on a hill overlooking their valley, where they could rest together under the mountains they had loved. Their grandchildren kept the cabin, maintaining it as a family gathering place and a reminder of where they all came from. The story of Adam learning Norwegian to tell Ophelia he loved her became the family's founding mythology, told and retold, a reminder that love requires effort and courage and the willingness to step outside your comfort zone. And sometimes, on quiet evenings when the wind was right, people claimed they could hear Norwegian lullabies drifting through the valley, Ophelia's voice singing to her children and grandchildren. Or they would glimpse a tall figure by the creek, a man with long hair and a beard, checking his trap lines the way Adam had done for so many decades. The mountains held onto the echoes of lives well lived, and some loves were strong enough to leave an imprint on the land itself. The story of the mountain man and the immigrant woman became local legend, then family history preserved in journals and letters and photographs. But more than that, it lived on in the values they had instilled in their descendants: kindness to strangers, respect for different cultures, the importance of family, and above all, the transformative power of love that crosses all boundaries. Adam and Ophelia Rowland had started with nothing but determination and affection, built an empire of the heart that enriched every life it touched. They had proven that the Wild West was not just a place of violence and harsh survival, but also a place where love could flourish, where families could be built, where 2 people from literally different worlds could create something beautiful together. Their legacy was not counted in acres or dollars, but in the number of people who could trace their happiness back to a moment on a dusty street in Malad City, Idaho, when a mountain man stopped to help a desperate woman who spoke no English. That simple act of kindness, followed by months of patient language learning and the courage to speak love in unfamiliar words, had changed the trajectory of dozens of lives. In the end, what more could anyone ask from a life than to be remembered with love, to have built something lasting, to have made the world a little better? Adam and Ophelia achieved all that and more. They had each other, they had their family, they had their mountains, and they had a love story that would be told for generations, inspiring others to reach across differences and take chances on love. The cabin still stood, weathered but strong, its walls full of memories and history. The creek still ran clear, the mountains still stood watch, and somewhere in that high valley, the echo of 2 voices speaking Norwegian and English, teaching and learning, loving and laughing, still lingered on the wind. Some stories never truly end because they live on in the hearts of those who remember them. And the love between Adam and Ophelia Rowland was exactly that kind of story, eternal and true, a light in the wilderness that would never quite go dark.